are live. Welcome to this special edition of UCFsports.com Live, talking about the inaugural Big 12 football schedule for UCF. We've got a couple esteemed guests to break it all down with me. I guess in your top right corner, we've got Eric Lopez of Black and Gold Banneret, and you may also know him from his broadcasting with UCF broadcasts on ESPN Plus. They've been the primary softball announcer for a number of years, and also does other sports as well. And Emily Bannister from what's your official title? UCF Twitter Mafia?
I think that's probably a good one.
I don't know. But, always awesome to talk to you, Emily, and everything. So, I mean, we've been waiting for that. I mean, it feels real now. I mean, not like it didn't before, but we're going on, a year and a half, I guess, since UCF was officially invited to the Big 12, and we're waiting for the 23 season, and we kept on hearing the schedule was going to come out. It's going to come out maybe October, November, December, and it was finally pushed back to today. But now that we see the dates and we know who UCF is going to play, it feels like it's happening. I mean, we knew it was, but we'll start with you, Eric. What was kind of your initial reaction when you saw everything today? You've been around the program as long as I have. Just seeing those names on that football schedule.
It's so bizarre, right? Because you and I have seen schedules going back to when they were an independent, going back to CUSA, the American, and the American. It's usually later, right? It's like later.
It's usually February. It's usually around now.
Now this one was going to come out early, but I think some kind of negotiations are going on in the background over there in the league there. But it was kind of surreal to see like Baylor coming here, Oklahoma State coming here. Normally it's like, oh, that's the one or two highlighted non-conference game. Oh, no, wait, there's more. That's a little different. Obviously, you got Houston to finish the year. No South Florida in there, but we do have Cincinnati and Houston. But it is kind of unique. It's going to get some time to get used to it. The interesting thing is, though, outside of Oklahoma, this is probably going to be a similar schedule we're going to have moving forward, because obviously Oklahoma will be moving to the SEC. But it is kind of surreal. Like, this is now. I guess this is officially now. We're in the Big 12.
Yeah. Emily, just what were your initial thoughts? Just we've been waiting, and then 2:00 we see it. Just what did you kind of think when you saw those dates and names?
I think bizarre was a good way to put it. I obviously don't have as much background with the school as the two of you do. Came into UCF in 2016. But it was kind of weird that we got this Big 12 announcement last year. We knew that it was coming. And then on a random Tuesday afternoon in January, we have this huge drop. And it's all of these schools that we always knew we wanted to play in some capacity. And now here it is, and it's a tangible schedule in front of us, and you can book flights, you can book hotels. And this isn't like a little treat that we're getting, like Eric mentioned, like a one-off or a two-off game. But this is going to be our new normal. This is going to be our new life. And that's a really, really exciting thing as a young UCF fan.
Yeah, it's just one of those things is anyone who's, you don't have to follow the program as long as I have. That's always just been the goal and the dream of UCF, that you always kind of felt the program was destined for bigger and better things, and just was maybe held back because of the age of the university. You feel like if UCF would have been in existence or started a football program maybe 20 years before, they would have already been in a quote unquote Power 5 league. And so, just seeing those names on there, I know that maybe there's a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, it's hard to say anything's a disappointment, but you don't get to host the Texas or Oklahoma for what we believe will probably be their final year in the Big 12 coming up. That's the one thing that I would have liked to have seen. I guess we'll hear about that. I know there's been some reports that they're negotiating an early exit, that they would join the SEC in 24. Now, if they were going to remain in the Big 12, I was hearing that UCF would be in line to host Texas in 2024. But I guess I know, Eric, you've heard a little bit about this, maybe that there's a lot of rumors going around that probably won't happen now with those teams going early to the SEC.
I've heard. Yeah, I agree. I've heard from sources that they're definitely, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think the schedule has, one of the main reasons, they'll deny it publicly, but it's one of the main reasons why this schedule hasn't been released. Because, Brandon, how long have you and I, between the people we know, have heard about this schedule? I mean, I heard about this schedule going back to December. I know you've probably heard stuff.
Yeah, and I posted, I guess it was right. I mean, I didn't know anymore. I heard, first I'm like hearing, oh, this random team's coming to the Bounce House, and maybe UCF's on the road at OU. I was kind of hearing bits and pieces throughout the football season, throughout the fall, and then you finally piece all the rumors together and like, well, wait, no, I've heard that team, and I had a pretty good idea. I thought of the 5 away in the 4 home games, and I posted it in the dungeon over the last month, and I put it on Twitter last. I guess it was right. I mean, I didn't know.
I heard a similar schedule.
Yeah, no one leaked me the schedule last. I just heard those were the teams. I guess it didn't be inaccurate, for its home and away breakups. Obviously, UCF this year is only going to have the 4 home games, and that'll flip flop every year. They'll have the 5 home games next year. But just Emily, when you look at the schedule, what excites you the most? Like, is there anything, 1 or 2 things when you look at maybe how it breaks down, the opponents, the layout? What kind of gets you excited when you look at this upcoming season schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think off the bat, Boise being week 1, I think that's a really, really fun opener.
It's week 2 because we got the Thursday night against Kent State, and
how can you forget that powerhouse?
Then it's at Boise. Yeah.
Oh, for some reason, yeah. Okay, I knew it was early. That's my mistake. Excitement of the schedule coming out. I haven't memorized it yet. But I think it being so early is fun. We've been waiting for this one for a few years now. Obviously, we started with Boise 2 seasons ago, so 2021 season. So I think it will be great to finally have the chance to go visit out there and see the iconic blue stadium. But on a personal note, just OU, I think that will be such a great one. I'm from the Oklahoma area, spent 9 years there, worked for an Oklahoma congressman all through college, just after college, where OU was actually in that district. And so to be able to kind of talk some smack with some good friends and former interns and former coworkers will just be so much fun. And it's actually my birthday weekend. So even better, gonna go back to the home state on a birthday weekend and to have kind of the UCF versus OU, former UCF quarterback, right as OU's leaving to the SEC on my birthday weekend. It's kind of a fun little storyline plot that I think will just be really cool and great and good football. I think it will be good football.
Now, have you ever been to an OU football game?
No, I've never been to an OU football game. I have been to Norman many, many times. I have been to other sporting events in Norman. I have run track at invitationals in Norman, but I have never been to a OU football game. So it will be a first.
That'll be fun. That'll be fun.
I've already been invited to go there for an OU softball practice and the football game. So I mean, that's people have been hitting me up on that. Now I'm seeing a lot of people are talking. If this game was at UCF, it would be huge, right? With the Dylan Gabriel storyline, Jeff Lebby, Brandon. I mean, that's a storyline in itself as the offensive coordinator. But I think the game being in Norman, it'll be more of a local story than a national story. The other thing jumps out at me is. Our first Big 12 game is at Kansas State. Now, Brandon, were you there that infamous time in Manhattan where the game got delayed with tornadoes?
It was a tornado warning, and I don't know if I can pull this up while we're talking because I did find the I'm
just hoping we get better weather.
There was so UCF in 2010, the 2010 season. It was late September. They went on the road to K-State. And I think it was going to be an 11 a.m. game. I think that was the deal. It was like an 11 a.m. game, and there was some sort of weather front coming through, and there was just this massive storm front, and it basically enveloped the stadium. It was wild. Okay, I'm trying to pull up the photos while we're talking to see if maybe I can do a screen share.
And that's late in the year for tornado season too. So that's
I remember it was so bizarre. It was kind of a close game. UCF kind of outplayed K-State. They kind of had an unproven quarterback, I remember, and they scored late. It was a brutal loss. But the weather was just
let's see. Wow. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that one's wicked.
That was 2010, and this story. I mean, and even the locals were getting scared, and they're kind of used to these things and
hardened by the tornado.
Exactly. I mean, that was some scary stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember they evacuated all the fans, or as many as they could, into the neighboring basketball arena, and it pushed through. It rained. Maybe there was, I don't know if any tornadoes touched the ground. I mean, but it looked worse than it was. But that was pretty scary when you see. I think might have been pregame warm-ups or right when the game first started. I think that's basically when that photo was taken. That was pretty crazy. But that'll be big, and that was one of those things that, for any UCF fans, kind of figuring out your travel plans and where you may or may not want to go. You might need to book these hotels. It's not like the American when you've got games against Temple and Philly and some of these cities where you've got tons of hotels and you get to the city and no one knows there's a college football game. This is not like that in the Big 12. You go to Manhattan, Kansas, obviously that's a college town. Kansas State's the only thing going. If you don't stay in Manhattan, you're probably staying, I don't know how far it is, Topeka or somewhere 30 miles away. Seriously, if you're not, so if you're looking to go to the K-State game, and I did this in the last 30 minutes, I highly recommend you go see what available hotels they have right now. Maybe there's a couple that haven't jacked them completely up. I noticed if you have, I think I booked something for like $240 a night, which you think might sound bad, but the other ones were like $400 or $500 a night. So I went ahead and booked a Manhattan hotel. But that'll be interesting.
That's the thing, because you one of the reasons you look forward to scheduling when the schedule comes out is you start looking as far as what trips you can pull off, because sometimes you like to see the city, sometimes you go you kind of figure it all out. So what was it been like for you as you're trying to figure, you're trying to kind of look at this at first glance? Because, you probably have Cincinnati in the back of your mind. You already know what you're going to do probably there. But now you got to learn like Lubbock, Texas. You got to learn Lawrence, Kansas, some new trips.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that, we don't know yet as someone who hasn't really been to many of these places. The only place I guess I've really been is Kansas State. That picture I just shared, I'm kind of familiar there. But yeah, I've actually booked a few more hotels in the last hour, just placeholder. You can cancel them. You have some flexibility. I think Lawrence, Kansas, that'll be the Kansas game. That'll be UCF's second road game in the Big 12, and I don't think that one's as bad. I think it's about 40 minutes from maybe Kansas City and some of those suburbs. It's not too far.
It's a little more urban.
Yeah, it's probably not that much different from UCF. I mean, you fly into the airport, it's probably 25-minute drive to campus. It's probably not that much different than that. So I went
and maybe if you're lucky, if the Chiefs are at home that Sunday, maybe you make a whole weekend out of it, because I know some of the fans like to do that. Like, I know Carson's big. Our friend Carson is a big fan of doing the double dipping, and a lot of people like to make that trip.
Yeah, we got the Cincinnati. We'll see what's going on. When does the NFL release their schedule? Do you know when that is?
April, May.
Is it always April?
May, yeah, right after the draft, shortly usually.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's a possibility. So
I know some people, I think that's something that we'll have to get used to, though, is some of, like you said, there's going to be not direct flights. You're going to have to do some kind of creativity.
Yeah, or be willing to pay extra for the direct flights.
True.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there really isn't, because Oklahoma City, I think when Southwest goes there, but I think it's a situation where they only go there like one day a week. Usually Southwest, when they go somewhere, they usually go every day, but there's a few markets where they only go, I think Cincinnati's one now where they only go like one day a week, but Cincinnati has other options. I'm not sure. I think Allegiant Air out of Sanford, they go to Oklahoma City, but, they have such weird... flight, like you have to leave on like a weird day, and then you have to wait till like Monday night at 9 p.m. to fly back or something. No, seriously, I think that's what it is. It's something where you couldn't even fly back on Sunday. You'd have to wait till like 9 o'clock Monday, because I looked a couple weeks ago, just picked some random days, and that's when they usually are. But travel is going to be a lot more difficult than it was to
also
some of these.
The other thing is more winter clothes.
Oh yeah,
we have to be worn. Like Lubbock in late November. I've had friends that work there. It's cold, man.
I will say this. Looking at the schedule, I think is probably the best case scenario for the most part in terms of weather.
Yes.
For UCF. Yes. Other than that Texas Tech game, who knows what it'll be like in Lubbock? But it's not back. You've got 2 out of the 4, at least two out of the last 3 are at home. And you got Cincinnati in early November. It starts to get kind of chilly then, but I don't think we're going to face any sort of bone chilling. You're not going to Iowa State,
Right.
I was thinking BYU.
In November.
Can you imagine BYU in like mid-November?
Yeah.
That's when they're starting to lay down snow for ski season. It's cold.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing I like about the schedule, if you guys looked at it, is that it's evenly distributed. It's home away, and then maybe there's back-to-back road games, but there's a bye week in between, so it's not like it's back-to-back weeks, and that just works out really well. It seems like every year there's always some weird quirk where there's 2 in a row at home. I mean, that's perfect for the home schedule because, just as far as keeping, I don't think ticket demand is going to be an issue, but, sometimes when there was you have like 2 out of 3 weeks are at home or something, it kind of, maybe it's a little bit harder to sell those extra tickets in the years past for some people, but I don't think that'll be an issue this year.
not a complicated schedule, which from an on the field standpoint, Brandon, don't you think gives me a little more optimism of maybe picking up an extra win or two than I thought going in? Because I thought, oh boy, and I'm not saying, look, it's still a tough schedule. It'll be the toughest schedule the program's had. But considering the options and some of the trips they could have had, I think it's a schedule you can live with as far as you maybe if certain things break right with the roster and things, you could still have more, maybe a couple extra more wins than maybe what people might think. I don't know what who knows what the expectations are, but the schedule is manageable, all things considered. Don't I at least I feel that way.
Yeah, you avoid Texas, and we need to kind of get in Big 12 mode where we're knowledgeable about all the teams. I don't know if I'm at that point yet. I mean, we know what TCU just did.
Sure.
I think Texas is on the upswing. I know K-State's coming off a great year, but wouldn't Texas and TCU sort of be considered top 2 or 3 in the league going into it? And UCF doesn't play those two teams. BYU, I don't know what to think about them, but let's say you don't have to go all the way out there and play a game. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see how this roster for UCF shakes out. I think there's still a lot to be determined with the transfer portal, and we'll see what happens after spring football. We'll see what happens with the quarterback position and the new offense with Darren Hinshaw. If that's stable or whatever they decide to do there. Offensive line, they got some big news yesterday with Drake Metcalf coming in to compete for that center job. So, that was kind of thrown for a loop recently with Matt Lee departing for Miami. So we'll see how UCF has some questions, but you're right. I think there's honestly, as far as expectations in year one, I know it's kind of defeatist to say, since I think UCF has been in a mode at least since 2018. We didn't know what to expect in 2017, but ever since 2017, you're in a mode where it's championship or bust. You felt like you had a championship. It didn't happen many of those years now, but you felt like you had a team that could contend for a championship. And I don't know if we can say that right now. I just think you need to go 3-0, obviously, in your non-conference. You got to go to Boise and get a win. If you can be 3-0 going into Big 12 play, I think you got a good shot to make a bowl game. I guess to me, that's the realistic goal. I mean, obviously, you'd like to do better than that.
The Cheez-It Bowl, Oklahoma at 6-6 got to that bowl game this past year. I don't think that's unreasonable. And if you go 6-6 at a minimum, you end up there in your backyard, possibly.
Yeah, and that could be maybe against, that's a Big 12 ACC
matchup,
bowl.
yeah.
And that's, Miami, we'll see, if they can make a bowl this year. They didn't this past season. I know expectations are higher in year 2 down there in Coral Gables. Wouldn't that be a story? UCF and Miami in a bowl game. But, so Emily, how excited are your friends I know you guys always travel to a lot of these places. We talked a little bit about it. Are you guys making plans? What kind of, other than Boise, are any of the people in your inner circle making plans to go to any of these other away games?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been chatting about it pretty much all morning, and just kind of in the excitement of the schedule releasing and where you would kind of piece together and where other schedules might have been leaked along the way, like where we might be going. So it sounds like we have a pretty good group that wants to go to Boise. It sounds like we have a pretty good group that wants to go to Norman. From both of the group chats that I'm in and then the chatter online that I've seen, that seems to be the big one for UCF fans. I am curious if that's driven by the atmosphere that OU is rumored to have and the fact that OU's leaving to the SEC the following year, or if that's driven by the Dylan Gabriel storyline, and seeing if maybe we can kind of sock one to him before we leave and see how that goes.
I heard you there. I heard that.
Thank you. Came up with that one on the fly. But yeah, I think those are the two big ones that I'm hearing right now. I'm hearing some rumblings of wanting to go to Texas Tech, but it's really, really tough to get into Lubbock. I don't know if between the Boise State and the OU game, if I'm going to have it in me to kind of make it out for one more, but those are the two that I'm hearing.
Well, OU is like a bucket list game too, even if it's a brand name. I mean, and I think you're right. I mean, the strong possibility that this will be the one and done. Basically, you play Oklahoma before they move to the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
So there's urgency there, whereas Lubbock, you could always go. I mean, I think fans are still, and Brandon, I don't know if you disagree or agree with this, the novelty of this just alone, I think people are going to try these trips the first time around just because it's the first time.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a minute ago. I'll be curious to see what kind of fan representation there are at these places. I think OU is definitely going to be the game a lot of people circle, and Oklahoma City might be a little easier to get to in terms of
18, 20 miles.
travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might. I think you'll see the biggest crowd there. Texas Tech late in the season, getting right up. It's not. It's the week before Thanksgiving. It's difficult to get there. I was just.
Plus, how is the season going at that point?
Yeah,
that also
like there's that plays a big factor, and people are less likely. A lot of people did go to New Orleans, for the regular season game.
But that's New Orleans. That's not Lubbock, Texas.
That's New Orleans. That's not Lubbock, Texas. So I would think that, right off the bat, I could say Texas Tech will probably be the least amount of UCF fans. And I'll be curious because, there's been, when UCF would play at Temple, they've got a huge alumni representation in the Northeast that would, aid that attendance. And, New Orleans, people love traveling there. I'll be curious to see just kind of how many fans make these trips because it's not going to be easy. Lubbock's going to require a connection somewhere. They don't have a lot of service, a lot of flights into their airport to a place like that. So I'll be curious to see how they go. Now, the one thing, I can't remember if I mentioned this on air or not, but I did check with someone at UCF, and we're looking, other than that opener against Kent State on a Thursday night, it's Saturdays the entire way. And, because if any UCF fan knows, we'd get a schedule release around now in the American through the years or Conference USA, and, a month or two later, we're like, oh, this game, it's actually going to be on Friday, or it's going to be on Thursday, and they would kind of do those arrangements after the schedule release. I asked someone at UCF, and they said, to the best of their knowledge, the games on Saturday, at least the ones that are Big 12 games, they're going to stay on Saturday. They did release, I think the Big 12, if you look at all the games released today, I think 6 or 7 were pre-selected for Thursday or Friday. And UCF doesn't have any of those. So I think we should feel pretty confident that when they say the game's on Saturday, they're going to be on Saturday. The one question is maybe Boise State. I don't think they've released their schedule yet, officially Mountain West. I kind of wonder if that's a Friday. To me, that kind of looks like a Friday night game.
It feels like it, right? Especially since when Boise was here, that was on a Thursday night. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it. So maybe don't. I know a lot of people are starting to make their plans for Boise, but I kind of wonder about that one. Maybe be flexible for another few weeks to see what happens there. But
also, don't you think, Brandon? I think something we'll have to get used to. Probably a lot of noon kicks, 3:30 kicks.
Yep.
With the Big 12 schedule. Well, Emily, you know about this. I mean, the Big 12 schedule's a lot of noon games early.
And noon for us might not be noon for where you're located.
Right. It could be 11 a.m. Central.
When we go to OU, if it's a noon kick, that's an 11 a.m. kick.
Yep.
Yeah. Like when UCF played at Kansas State, that was 11 a.m. When they played at Texas in, I think, the 2009, that was 11 a.m.
11 a.m.
It comes early. And we'll see. The one thing that's going to be a little bit unique for these next 2 seasons is this is under the old television contract. And I don't know if they had the flexibility. Like I said, there's not, it's all kind of predetermined on, the Thursday and Friday night games. It's not kind of, maybe the American has been a conference where you play a lot of those Thursday, Friday night games. Now, I think because there's going to be with 14 teams and you're coming from a league that was only playing 10, that's a lot more inventory in a given season. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot more ESPN Plus games.
Yep.
And the thing with ESPN Plus, which might be a positive if you're going to be at the game, is that for the most part, I think the home team can choose when they kick off. So if you're going to be on ESPN Plus, you're not going to play at noon. You can say we're going to play a night game. Maybe that's a positive. Maybe that kind of avoids some of the noon games we might ordinarily get if we were on regular television.
I agree with that. And I think the TV slots could be not like I don't think we'll be on Big Fox a lot, for example, because if what I'm hearing and from what if OU and Texas do bolt after this up next year, and that seems to be the rumor, and that's why this has all been delayed. So people have been asking about that. I would assume that Fox in particular is going to want to showcase Oklahoma and Texas before they bolt for the SEC. When they go to the SEC, basically it's all ESPN. So I think OU and Texas will get a lot of good slots. I would not be surprised if that OU game, in fact, is UCF's best TV slot of the schedule, just because it's Oklahoma. That would not surprise me, but I do think we'll have some afternoon games. That Texas Tech game feels like a 9 p.m. FS1. Like, find your remote. That's the other thing we're going to have to get used to is where's Fox Sports 1? What? Like, Are we on your ESPN Plus? What? So we'll have to get used to some of that. Scheduling wise, we haven't discussed the home slate.
Yeah. That was what I was going to say next, because I'm thinking like we were talking about away games, road trips, travel. You're right. We haven't talked about the home games, and just looking at it. I guess the Big 12 home opener is going to be September 30th against Baylor. The team that UCF fans are very familiar with.
10-year anniversary of the
that
2013 season. Yeah.
And then you got West Virginia at home and Oklahoma State and Houston. So, Emily, we'll start with you. What home game are you most looking forward to? Did any of those kind of stand out that, you've kind of circled in your mind?
Oklahoma State. I have so many friends from high school that went to OSU, and they're already texting me, and they're like, "Hey, we're coming into town." I know I was made aware last night from some friends of kind of the off-season struggles that OSU has had. But
they've had a lot of guys leave. They've had a lot of transfer portal people.
Yeah, and I know that the defensive coordinator may not have like as strong of a resume as some other candidates may have had for them. But I just always feel like even on their worst years, they always were a little bit of a trap team, and they always come away with some really odd, surprising wins. So I think that it will actually end up being a pretty good game. And if it's not a good game, then hopefully we come out of it with a pretty good, strong statement win. But having friends come in for that one, they're already so excited to see the bounce house. So excited to spend some time in Orlando. And that to me is very, very exciting. From an actual opponent standpoint, I think Baylor. Baylor is always a pretty strong team. Eric mentioning that it's a 10-year anniversary of the Bortles season. I think that will be a really, really fun game as well.
Brandon, we got to put the marketing hat on for UCF here. This is easy. The Baylor weekend, right?
Exactly.
You honor the 2013 team. It's right
there.
I
mean, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Bring the guys in, bring them on the field. Can you do a throwback jersey? Sign me up. I'm all for that one.
I mean, we're going to see highlights.
Bring O'Leary back. I mean, that one.
Oh God.
I mean, yeah, and it's also big because that's your first ever Big 12 home game. I mean, that's against Baylor. I mean, I think the marketing possibilities are endless. So, Eric, what are you looking forward to? Just looking at that home slate, is there anything that kind of catches your eye?
Yeah, I think the Baylor game. Obviously, we just talked about the highlight. West Virginia homecoming, kind of interesting. I think what's interesting about this home schedule, it's kind of you got West Virginia, Neil Brown's probably the Coach Brown's on the hot seat there. Oklahoma State had a terrible finish last season. Mike Gundy lost a lot of personnel, although I think one of our UCF former players just joined the coaching staff there, didn't he? Yeah. So that would be kind of cool. But it'd be cool to see Oklahoma State here for the first time ever, and to see Baylor here for the first time. West Virginia on a homecoming. That feels like a rowdy crowd, if you ask me. The West Virginia fans and UCF fans, we might have some Brandon, you might have some footage of people getting into fights or something in the stands for the West Virginia game. That could be a little feisty there.
A little spicy.
Yeah, that's the one game that I guess we'll see what happens in terms of rivalries in a league like this when there's no geographically close teams like UCF has had with maybe you could say their former rival South Florida, if they're not going to play anymore. Is it still a rival? But West Virginia and Cincinnati to me kind of seem like the teams because they're in the eastern half of the country at least. Maybe there's a better chance. And I know West Virginia, they've got a lot of people in the state of Florida. There's tons of West Virginia natives and people who have moved down here, and I know they're going to be traveling en masse coming down from West Virginia. So I'm kind of curious to see if that game can kind of build up into something. I know when West Virginia and UCF are going to have a little bit of something in common because I know they've, when you read their message boards and see their comments from their fans, they're happy they're in a Power 5 league because there was some uncertainty there when, the Big East was kind of falling apart. And, eventually Louisville, there's that whole Louisville versus West Virginia thing, which one's going to get in the Big 12, and then Louisville ended up getting in the ACC. But if West Virginia was up to them, they'd be in the ACC when they have geographic rivals like Pitt and Virginia Tech. They'd love to be back in that league, but they haven't really developed like the hardcore rivalries in the Big 12. And I think for UCF fans, I think we don't really care. I mean, you factor in a Power 5, you're going to have better access to the playoff. The TV revenue is going to be much more. You're going to be playing real teams with real fan bases because that's something where, half the AAC has no fans, maybe more than that. I just think, we don't care as much about that. And West Virginia's always kind of been, I know they were an independent for a while in the Big East. They kind of always have kind of been on that bigger stage. So for maybe them, it's it impacts them more. But, UCF, other than USF, all of our conference games have always been, multiple states away and playing trips. So, yeah, it'd be great if UCF was in the ACC and you play Florida State and Miami every year, but that's just not realistic. So West Virginia, just that being said, I think that can maybe turn into a rivalry just because I think we'll see a lot of fans in the bounce out just from all these teams, but everyone's going to decide we're going to come down to Orlando. We're going to take the family, go to Disney World, maybe go golfing or something. But I think we'll see a lot of West Virginia fans. That'll be an interesting atmosphere.
I think we'll definitely see a lot of visiting fans, more than we're used to, right? And as a result, probably a lot more ticket demand. Ticket prices probably going up, Brandon, you think? I mean, it's
yeah, I think they've gone up a little bit. And one thing, someone was making a comment, when is the space game? And I know UCF made their press release, and it doesn't – I don't think they've designated a space game. I know
they haven't.
Homecoming is West Virginia. You were right about that. Family weekend is the Villanova home game on September 16th. I don't think any of the other home games have been designated. There's always like a armed service tribute game, and there's always a space game. I know it's going to happen. I know they've already, those jerseys, those uniforms, they work on them a year in advance. So I know they're already working on next year's. So we'll see when that game.
I would assume Oklahoma State might be the
it almost feels
target,
like
right?
it has to be because I don't know if you do it against Baylor, your Big 12 home opener, and then if homecoming is the 28th, I think it has to be. It'd be interesting if they did it at the end of the year because you play Houston, and Houston has the space tie-in. Maybe Houston could, have a special helmet, Orlando, Houston, that space angle. I mean,
I know some people have been pushing for that. Some people have been pushing for that. The only issue is, do you want to do that on the same day as Senior Day?
Yeah.
Maybe you do. Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe that would be the only question.
I'm looking in the comments and I don't know how many options you have because so either it is Baylor as your home opener or somebody in there said that OSU is on Veterans Day. So that's probably going to be the
November 11th. Yeah, good point. November. That's definitely military appreciation.
So that's military appreciation. So that leaves you Houston or Baylor is basically what you're going to have.
Got to be Houston.
Or Villanova. I mean,
it's Houston, and I'm sure Houston could play it up. They could even just get a special helmet decal, even if they're the road team or something. Yeah, I bet.
Well, that's a way to kind of juice up the matchup.
I was going to say, make it fun, market it, get it blown up. I mean, all Houston's and ours have gone viral multiple years in a row. Go ahead and play that angle.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here. Just we'll begin with you, Eric. Just any final thoughts on looking at everything and just the excitement now that we know who UCF is playing and when they're going to do it. Just kind of any final thoughts on everything we've talked about this afternoon.
Let's enjoy it. Like, take it in. Like, it's going to be fun. Try not to put win losses on it because you're going to be like there's no more there's no more temples in our schedule. So there's no South Floridas even. I mean, every game will be intriguing, but I think it's kind of I feel like this should be a honeymoon to some extent, just to kind of a new experiences. And like I said, it's going to be a lot of first. I mean, I think there'll be a lot of people in Manhattan just because it's the first Big 12 game ever. I think the Baylor home game will be special. Oklahoma will be special. West Virginia unique. I mean, even Cincinnati, we can't get rid of Scott Satterfield. You're going to see him again. The Louisville head coach is the new head coach at Cincinnati following Luke Fickell. So it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see what the fans kind of react to it as the games go. I wish the OU game was here, but I understand it's not. It's so be it. So yeah, let's just enjoy the games. And I would assume there's no more excuses of, man, I can't believe we're playing that team. I'm not interested. Like, this is what you wanted to be. I expect tickets to be hard to find.
I absolutely agree with you. What about you, Emily? Just kind of after we've talked about everything and seeing everything and letting it soak in, what are kind of your final thoughts on seeing everything now in the full schedule?
I think Eric brings up a good point. Enjoy it. There's no reason to sit here and go back and forth on whether or not we're screwed going into the Big 12 or if we're going to go ahead and go in there and win a championship. Let's just really enjoy the fact that we got here after so many years of fighting to get to where we are. Enjoy making trips with your friends, with your family, enjoy looking at going to different places. Try not to get too caught up in the fact that a lot of our games are in flyover states. We have the really unique opportunity in the Big 12 to visit some really, really cool genuine college towns where they live, breathe, sleep, eat college football. And there is just some really unique opportunities to go in there and have a lot of fun, watch some good football, watch some talented players, and kind of settle ourselves in. So just buckle up for the ride, get to where you can, and really enjoy every bit of it.
I agree with both of y'all, and is this one of those things where I think UCF, I think as a fan base, kind of felt it this past year. You know where you're going. You know you were going to the Big 12. All those years of just all the tension and just your anxiousness that you feel like you have to perform. You know, I know the fans don't go out there and play the games, but I think maybe the meltdowns kind of were the result of just people like, oh, you got to get in the Power Five. You got to win 10 games every year. You got to win conference championships. You got to go to New Year's 6 games. You got to do what you do in 2017 and 2018. You got to do that every year, and I know that can be unrealistic. Sometimes you're not going to win every game. I think some fans think that you should, but I think the fact that you know where you're going, you know you're going to be in a great conference. It's Power 5. There's none of that, oh, we're going to remove that status. We know what the playoffs going to look like. We know what the TV contract's going to look like. No, it's not going to be SEC or Big Ten money, but it's going to be right up there, probably third amongst those leagues. UCF is a big boy now. Maybe to some it may not hit you or feel like it right away, but all those little kind of trivial things that UCF fan base would worry about, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So like I said, just enjoy the experience, enjoy the ride, enjoy these new teams, these new experiences. We'll see what comes out. I don't know what kind of interviews the commissioner is doing today, if anything, or some of these administrators. I'll be curious to see maybe what the schedule looks like, how the format, if Texas and OU leave. I remember they initially said that everyone was going to play everyone at least once in this initial 2-year period. Now, maybe that goes out the window with Texas and Oklahoma if they do leave. So we'll see what the schedule looks like the following year. But, if you got an opportunity to go to OU, you don't want to pass that up. This is the only time that UCF is probably ever going to have the experience of playing at Oklahoma. If you can swing it to go to a Texas Tech or a K-State, do it. It may be a few more years, especially if this Pac-12 stuff. We'll see what happens. I know there's kind of in limbo. They, some TV issues with their network and the TV contracts. Who knows? If there's going to be maybe a bigger Big 12 in a few years. But I'm just excited. Now we know what to plan for. It feels real. So that's just the most exciting thing for me today.
Well, and I think one thing that'll help the expectations in the American, if you won 10 games but didn't get to New Year's 6, you felt disappointed because of the bowl game you were going to, like the Military Bowl or the Big 12. You could go 6-6 and get a good quality bowl game. I mentioned the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando. That's a marquee bowl game. The Alamo Bowl, you'd play an SEC team. So you're going to get some fresh new bowl games if you're bowl eligible and play some better matchups. Like UCF, Florida, Gasparilla, that'll be more common as far as the opponent type, whereas that was kind of the exception to the rule when you're in the American. I think that's the other thing, Brad. I think that'll help to kind of take a breath. If you go 6-6, hey, we're still going to a good bowl game, whereas if you go 7-5, 6-6 in the American, it's like, oh,
you're playing Ball State and,
right.
and the Beef Bowl. Okay, that's what it is. Yeah. So you're right. You're totally right about that. And that, I think fans can be, and everyone's always going to, the goals will be there. You want to get to a point where you win in the Big 12 and you're going to the playoff and everything, but just everything is just going to be on a bigger stage, and maybe the disappointments won't be quite as big if you slip up in a game or two. Even if they make the playoff, you don't have to go 12-0. I mean, you could go potentially 10-2, 11-1. If you got a strong schedule, and then that's one thing. We'll see if it pans out. We haven't heard a lot in terms of future non-conference games, and there's only going to be 3 of those every year with the 9 conference games. But hopefully, it should open up the door to bigger and better, because that's obviously been a point of contention the last few years. Is Danny White didn't schedule games, and then teams were afraid to schedule UCF, and we'll see how that goes, but. Guys, it's been a blast. I just thought it'd be fun to kind of gather and talk and kind of just break everything down. And I've had fun over these last 40 minutes. I thought we'd go about 30, but time flies when you're talking about what you love. So I appreciate it, Eric and Emily. I'll see you guys around, and I definitely can't wait for this inaugural Big 12 football season.
It's a pleasure, Brandon. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
thanks so much for having me.
Take care, guys. Charge on.
Bye.